Hello, welcome to P Gurus. Please like, share, and subscribe. Even if you want to abuse us, please abuse us. It helps the algorithm. And we are now doing the unanswered questions from this last week. Shall we start? Aditya B. With the goal to be able to answer Q&A on any given topic, how should one approach researching it? Your tips to average guys like me. Also, happy birthday. Yes, happy birthday to you, Aditya. Uh, and how should you research it? The easiest way, surprise, surprise, is actually go to Wikipedia. I don't for most things, but if it's science and things like that, because I'm not a science student, I go to Wikipedia and it gives me a fairly decent overview of everything. Now, what happens in Wikipedia if you're researching it is you get all the in-depth sources and things like that. Sometimes, and Wikipedia is a very biased source. So I never go by Wikipedia, but then I go to the topics. If there's something of interest or something I did not know, I find the topics there and I do Google searches about the books and the papers cited, especially about critiques and criticisms and things like that. And that is how I do the backward trail. The forward trail is basically, people only ask me about foreign policy, defense policy, and social policy, which is anyway my forte, which I've read up lots on. So I don't really need to do too much more additional reading. What I've described to you is forensic reading. But the question is, Aditya, do you really want to go on a Q&A on any given topic? Like, why? I mean, I would never accept a Q&A on science or physics, or especially not mathematics. So yeah, why would you want to do that? Next. Siddhave. Do you think Western right wing sees Hindu nationalism positively? No, absolutely not. They see it very negatively. The Western right is very local, so they don't view anything. In fact, the Western right refers to the Western left when it comes to analyzing India. Which is the reason that Geert Wilders was the only person to talk about Nupur Sharma, because there's significant, people don't realize this, but there has always been a very significant Indian Hindu minority in Holland, largely from the Dutch colony of Suriname, which is basically Indians. You go there, it's really weird because they're like Indian speaking Dutch. And he would have primary sources. The second biggest RSS in Europe after UK is in fact in Holland. So he would know, but the others don't, and people like Rishi Reddy don't care. Is there a chance of alliance or understanding between Zionists, Hindu nationalism, and the Western right wing? Zionists and Western right wing, yes. Hindu nationalism and Zionists, little to none. Hindu nationalism and the Western right wing, not unless we take a dedicated mission to educate them and change their minds. We also, most importantly, have to reconcile our positions about conversion. Okay, because conversion is core to the Western right. It is antithetical to us. Next. Atresh Shigawal. With every Israeli missile that drops, won't the hatred of civilians in Gaza increase permanently and detour the hope of a two-state solution, even without the Hamas being in power? Sure, but that's assuming that Gaza isn't already incredibly radicalized, and it is. Therein lies the problem. Because the entire system is operated to brainwash you into jihad from the minute you're born. How much more radicalized then can you get possibly? I don't know. This is going to be a 50, 60-year process of de-radicalization. And I don't think, making peace with Hamas would have in any form or way, or not taking action, reduce the radicalization. Because when 80 to 90% of your population is radicalized, what are you going to do? Next. Kunav Puttur. What are some differences between Iyer and Iyengar culture? Little to none. It's a very, very similar culture. Maybe incest is a bit higher in Iyengars than it is in Iyers. It's a big problem. I don't know. This is not a joke, by the way. Tambrams have a huge incest problem, highly problematic. it's not bad as bad as say Muslims in India, but it's still pretty damn bad. It is vastly reduced now. It used to be a very big problem, and it used to be slightly higher amongst Iyengars than it was amongst Iyers. But in terms of culture, virtually nothing. It is a theological difference. And it is, things like, so for Iyengars will wear this, Iyers will wear this, and Iyengars will only give Vishnu and Lakshmi names. Iyers will give both Vishnu and Shiva. Iyers are Smarthas. They're not Shaivite. They worship everyone. Iyengars will only worship. So it's only a theological difference in terms of culture, in terms of, there's also things like the Punal, the Janau. The Iyengar Janau is thicker than the Iyer Janau. So there's small things of ritual, but it's the same thing. You still wear the Janau, right? There's the same rules of not eating onion and garlic and things like that. The Iyengars are a bit more conservative. Iyers are not. So it's very minor differences like that. Next. Dr. MPC. Why is your friend Dr. Hudbhoy misinforming about Indian identity history? Shushruta and government had in India in recent black hole videos. What is a black hole video? I don't know. Look, the next time I speak to Professor Hudbhoy, I'm going to have a very serious chat with him. The problem is, he's, I think his sources of history are all wrong. It's that simple. And I will sit down and have a chat with him because, phone Zoom isn't the best way to have a chat. It's a one-on-one. That's always been our relationship. We sit and thrash out things one-on-one, and that's what I'll do when I meet him next. Next. Naman Kandapal, do strikes by Pakistan part of retaliatory actions against India for raw kills in Pakistan? Also part of a... Okay, so no. It's almost certainly raw that's doing the killing, not directly, of course. Like I've said, this crime is fungible. So Indian strategy is to use criminal networks in Canada, America, Pakistan against them because, criminals will do anything for money. So you have to look at this very differently. Raw kills in Pakistan are very different. They're not being used to extend or undermine the elections. And Nawaz Sharif has been acquitted on order, of course, so that he comes back. Now, the question is, will he actually win an election? Because there's only so much you can do to rig an election. If the feeling for Imran and against Nawaz is too high, then no matter how much they rig, Imran might just win the next election. So let's see what happens with that. And FATF, no impact at all. Because what happens is FATF is based on a checklist. It's not based on domestic politics. Next. Dr. MPC, have you ever tried vada made in waffle iron? I have actually, and it's actually pretty damn good. It's not a waffle iron. I had those non-stick, that sandwich maker, which every time you buy it in the West. So when I lived in Australia, it used to come in, it used to come with a waffle, this thing. And I have made it in it, and it actually comes out really well. So I would encourage you all to try it. It can actually be crunchier than a fried vada for longer. It isn't spongy on the inside. So one of the things is the outside should be crunchy and the inside should be spongy when you fry it, like a donut pretty much. But what it does do is it stays crunchy throughout. And it's delicious. So I highly recommend it. Just reduce the amount of water that you're using while you're grinding the vada marble. Next. Raghava B, where do you see the Israel-Hamas war going in the next 3 months? Exactly where it is today. I'm not seeing an improvement in the situation because Israel has basically decided to clear Gaza of Hamas. They're going to finish off all the Hamas ground troops. So it's going to be where it is today. There may be geographical changes, but that's about it. Next. Mr. Tween, thoughts on the NIT Srinagar case? Well, there's a very concerted attempt from, we don't know. My friend Hawkeye has been tracking all these handles that blew it up. And there seems to be bot handles possibly from across the border that have blown this up. There's no tension in Srinagar. There's no tension. It's only at that particular university and 2 more universities where Some terror-affiliated student organizations have come out and protested, and that's about it. But there is a concerted attempt at fanning it on the internet, which has been shut down because the moment they start getting reported, they shut up immediately. Most of them seem to have deactivated their accounts after this thing. So yeah, next. Naman Kandapal, is Agniveer part of the Shekatkar committee reforms suggested? I don't know. And have those suggested reforms been beneficial economically to improve teeth to tail? I don't know. I don't know because I haven't studied Agniveer. I stay out of personnel issues completely. Sorry, Naman. Wrong person. Next. Swagat S. What should India have done to deal with US CIRF in regards to the Delhi riots? Very simple. You need more diplomats. You need them engaging at all levels of US government, giving them actual facts on the ground instead of ignoring them and allowing them to base their assessments on newspaper reports, which are anyway extremely biased. Next. Moon Patel. Why didn't the French colonial empire collapse as rapidly as the British colonial empire did after World War II? Well, the French colonial empire was more profitable, number one. There were certain parts of it which yielded much greater resources than the British Empire did, number one. Number two, the British were looking at this purely as a cost-benefit calculation. The moment India started, it took them a while because India stopped paying its bills in 1911 or 1919, I forget. But whenever it stopped paying its bills, it still took the British 20 years to realize it wasn't paying its bills. The French Empire, it took them a lot longer because they were more wedded to the notion of civilizing influence and all of that. They were less pragmatic in their economic calculations. But the expenditure on the French colonial empire was less than on the British colonial empire. It also meant that the resource extraction was greater. Remember, you had the French nuclear tests happen in Algeria, in a place called Regan, before they were shifted over to the Pacific atolls and things like that. Vietnam was important in agricultural production and things. They had lots of rubber producing colonies in Vietnam, in Africa. Spice was still very important in Vietnam, in Indochina and French Indochina and things like that. So it was, I don't remember the exact economic calculus anymore, but there was also that residual pride, French Empire, French civilizing. A lot of it had to do with losing the war. The British were never occupied during the war. So it wasn't an issue of prestige. For the French, it was very much an issue of prestige. Next. Sid Dave, if Europeans did not discover the Americas, do you think Yuan Mongols, Ottoman Turks, or the Japanese could have done it? Were Native Americans always doomed regardless? Yes, Native Americans were doomed regardless because of the disease. Okay, and remember, it was in fact discovered several times. The first people to discover it was about 20, well, depending on which hypothesis, the Sultrian hypothesis or whichever one you follow, it was discovered somewhere between 22 to 13,000 years ago by East Asians crossing the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska, from Kamchatka to Alaska, crossing the Bering Strait. The second time it was discovered again was by the Eskimo tribes, what we today call the Eskimo tribes, over and over again because of ice caps and their mastery of ice caps. But they were the third people to discover it. The second people to discover it were in fact white people. They were Vikings. Not once, they sent several expeditions there. There were at least 5, 6 expeditions that we know of. Some people speculate 15, 16 expeditions that we know of, which went there, settled down there, probably spread disease, but that disease also probably got contained because it was in a very sparsely remote location, the Labrador coast and Newfoundland and things like that, Canada mostly. which didn't really take off beyond that. But we still have no description of disease, which I find quite surprising, because at that time plague was quite rampant. But because they came from Greenland and Iceland, those in itself might have been some kind of secure colonies against the plague. Though we have reports of plague in Greenland and Iceland from later, I don't think we have reports of plague in the 980s. In fact, the Vikings discovered Greenland 70 to 90 years before the Inuit did. And the Inuit Eskimo kind of tribes discovered America also after the Vikings did. So you had at least 3 discoveries of it. Then there is the Piri Reis map, which is in the Topkapi Museum, which is before the time of Columbus, but it clearly shows the coast of America. So how does a map that has decisively been dated to before Columbus show the map of America? So there was clearly some kind of thing happening out there. The question was, what is sustainable? See, the first land invasion, which happens from Siberia 20 to 13,000 years ago, is sustainable because they come into fertile green land. They keep getting isolated in ice pockets for a few thousand years till the ice age, mini ice ages break, and they start moving south, and then they propagate. But where the subsequent 2 waves, the Viking wave, we know for a fact because it is documented, it was not sustainable. I think it was the growth in the Middle Ages that made the colonization of the America by the Europeans sustainable. Would the Mongols, Ottomans, Turks, and Japanese have been able to sustain it? I think not. Thank you, folks. I think this was all the extra questions we had left over from this week. And I hope to see you next week. Please like, share, subscribe, leave comments, even nasty comments if you want. It helps the algorithm. Thank you very much. Bye.